Happy Friday. We got Chuck Silver here and Nick Marro talk about some NBA DFS with Occupy Fantasy. Nick, how we doing today?
Good, man, good. Had to deal with a two-game slate yesterday where we are talking about the likes of Jay Crowder, Pat Connaughton. So looking forward to a much bigger slate where we don't have to really dumpster dive so deep.
Yeah, luckily we're not going to have to go that deep
Yeah.
into the player pools, but we do have some clear top plays. I think from the model, we have some really good values. We have a couple super chalk values. Dayron Sharp is the one that comes to mind. Maybe a couple of the guys on Portland now that we know Anthony Simons is out. But any initial thoughts on today's slate?
Yeah, I mean, first thing I want to say, I'm a Nets fan, so I have a little bit of insight on Dayron Sharp. Not the best player, but if he starts, he is kind of like Goodwin last night, and then he's going to be unavoidable at that price. But don't be surprised against Dallas, who has kind of a smaller front court, if he does come off the bench. I still think he's going to be viable here, regardless. Again, he's so damn cheap, but if he's 80% owned in tournaments on the 10-game slate, I think there is some merit to maybe going a little under the field at least. But yeah, if you're the type who wants to see him in the starting lineup, if you're going to be heavy on him, I would just make sure you have a little bit of wiggle room in the 8:30 games and later because Jacques Vaughn, really tough coach to read. And yeah, we've seen at times Ben Simmons could start at center. It's an option tonight for them. I don't know that we see that, but just something to keep in mind, I think, that no one's really talking about.
Yeah, we haven't projected for about 54% ownership at basically min price over on
Mm,
DraftKings, and he's a
yeah.
little more expensive on FanDuel. It's not coming in with quite as much ownership. We have him for 25 minutes. I mean, if he plays 25 minutes, then he's
Oh,
going to
yeah.
be a really good play on
He's going to
DraftKings,
smash.
especially. So let me transition over here. All right, so we're taking a look at the model, and I have it sorted by DK value right now since we already started talking about Dayron Sharp, and it's just very clearly the model thinks that he's so far and away the best play on the
Yeah.
slate. And we get some questions every day. I don't know if we've addressed this, but what's a good DK value? What's a good OF index? And it's all relative to that base slate. What is
Mhm.
everyone else looking at? And today, Dayron Sharp at a 25.9 DK value. It's one of the highest that we're going to have all season, probably.
Yeah, that's insane.
And
Yeah.
so,
I almost want to take back what I said because I don't want to take people off the play. I think more what I should have said is that he's going to be fine even if he's coming off the bench. Don't panic because he is so damn cheap and really the only center there. I don't think we call Trenton Watford a center at this point. So, um, yeah, just don't be alarmed if he's not in the starting lineup. That is a ridiculously high value rating.
So while we're on the Nets, I have a question for you. If they
Mhm.
do decide to go a little bit small, do you see them maybe throwing Ben Simmons at the center spot at all, getting a few minutes?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what they do. We saw them do it a few times last season. They're very conscious of like Ben Simmons's, I don't know, confidence and just where he's at mentally. So I think they want him at point guard. They want to see him kind of running the offense. But on a night like tonight with Claxton out, I think it does make sense to maybe play Simmons there, especially again against a small front court with Kleber and the rookie there, Lively for Dallas. Not one of the bigger teams they're going to be up against. So it wouldn't shock me, but at the same time, part of me is like maybe they just go with Sharp because they really want to get Simmons comfortable playing the true point. But yeah, he's a positionless player, as so many call him, and for better or worse, I do think he could play center here.
So one thing I do want to point out about Ben Simmons, so he does have that point guard small forward eligibility over on DraftKings. He only
Mhm.
played 23 minutes in the last game. I mean, he put up 4 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists. Like if he does that in 23 minutes, we're pretty happy with him. If he has the potential to play, closer to 30, maybe they're trying to ease him back in.
Yeah, and he's 100% healthy. I can't say that. He looks good. He's more explosive than he's been since he was on the Sixers and healthy. So, yeah, it's been a while. I actually like Ben Simmons regardless of Sharp starting or not tonight. You mentioned the small forward eligibility on DK. He is power forward on FanDuel, which is certainly helpful over there. A lot of good guard value tonight. So maybe you don't want to use that spot up for someone like Simmons, but we see it. He can hit value even if he's never shooting. And they're really trying to get him to be more aggressive. I don't know that ever happens. But yeah, he can fill a stat sheet without scoring, which is always nice, especially on FanDuel where you get extra points for the blocks and steals.
And while we're on the Nets, we do have a question in the chat from Chris Davis. Cam Thomas, instant offense time. What are we doing with Cam Thomas tonight?
Yeah, I mean, if he's not going to be owned, I could see going back there. I will say he's about as scoring dependent as you're going to see. Like, he has a very low floor because he's not going to get many rebounds, not going to get assists. not going to get any peripherals on defense. But if he's still sub 5%, I think you could compare him to some of those guards in Portland that are going to become a lot more popular. Again, wide range of outcomes. I know on paper it doesn't make sense to keep rolling this guy out there if he's coming off the bench, but I think he's finally earned true rotational minutes. Vaughn was super hesitant to play him, even coming off like back-to-back 40-point games last year. Nets fans have been livid about it, but yeah, it seems like he is the true sixth man. He was the first off the bench against Cleveland. Don't like that he didn't close in that game. Probably cost him the win, honestly. But yeah, he's a boom bust GPP play. Don't be playing him in cash or anything like that, but especially on DK at 5,100. If you want upside in a guard, I mean, he could 7-8x and no one's going to be surprised about it.
So Cam Thomas didn't close necessarily. So he was on the court for the last possession, but I think he should have been on the court a little more.
That's what I meant. Yeah. Once they were behind, they brought him back on for shooting, but they closed with Dinwiddie and I think Simmons, I want to say. But yeah, that's a whole other conversation. I don't think he's going to be closing if they're up. I think when they're behind and they need the points, they'll bring him in. But yeah, he's the best scorer on that team by far, so it's frustrating. He is a liability on defense, but that team's kind of built to support something like that with guys like Simmons, Claxton. I know he's out tonight, but he took a big step forward. And then they have all those wings and guys like O'Neal, et cetera, who play defense really well. So I think Vaughn's is being overly cautious with them. Maybe it helps him in his career in the long run, but for fantasy and as a Nets fan right now, it's frustrating.
Yeah. So with Cam Thomas last night, I was looking at it and I said if he was going to be kind of chalky, I was going to avoid him. But we haven't projected for 1% on DraftKings.
Exactly.
His FanDuel price is a little bit more than I'm willing to pay. There's a lot of good players in that price range over there. But 5,100 on DraftKings at 1% projected ownership is pretty reasonable. I wouldn't be surprised if he showed up maybe 5% GPPs tonight. But this is a spot that I think is pretty okay. And even the other guys you mentioned, Mikal Bridges is going to look fine.
I like
so
Bridges, yeah.
There's some options from Brooklyn. And then from the other side of that game on Dallas, the number one play in the OF index today is Luka Doncic.
Shocking.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, he's a beast, man. And this is a great matchup for him. I don't know. Some people want to talk about revenge here for Kyrie, whatever. It's Luka's offense, and he's on the floor more. He's taking the ball up the court. Even if Kyrie is shooting, he's going to be getting assists and rebounds, putbacks, everything else. I love Luka here. Probably my favorite pay up on the slate in a vacuum, like not really considering price or anything like that. But he is tough to fit. But if we do get some breaking news, I think we'll see that ownership climb. But I mean, 3% on FanDuel, I'm definitely going to be way over that. Yeah, probably more like 30 for me. And I see he's still sub 10% on DK. I'm sure he's tough to fit unless we get more value. But again, it's Luka. He looks like he's in mid-season form. I know in seasons past, it took him a little while to play into shape, but it doesn't seem like that's the situation at all this year.
Well, so one thing I think that's pushing down Luka's ownership is that we have a lot of good point guard plays tonight.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, looking at the top of the model sorted by OF index, I mean, Trae Young is showing up here pretty high. Shai Gilgeous, Steph, Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie, Paul George, De'Aaron Fox, and everyone is under 10% except for Donovan Mitchell. So if you're trusting the model tonight, you can really play a couple of these guys and you can build out the rest of your lineups however you like. Don't worry about, playing the super chalk. Day'Ron Sharp. We got a Jabari Smith whose price is just completely incorrect. Should be $1,000 more on both sites. I think Sengun is actually going to get steamed up a little bit. He already is 25% ownership about on both sites. And Jock Landale's out tonight. So I could see Sengun playing a couple extra minutes at center. I could see Jabari Smith sliding down to the center for a few minutes. And, 31 projected minutes at 7K for Sengun against San Antonio. Yeah, he's going to match up against Zach Collins. He's going to have Wemby, sitting there waiting for him on the other block. But I think these are both pretty good spots to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely like Sengun. And I mean, we're talking about the ownership at guard. I mean, Chris Paul on DK, 6,600. That's pretty egregious pricing. If you're going to eat some chalk, that's probably relatively safe over there. And then one guy I really like on both sides at guard, only 5K for Jeremy Sochan over on DK. You're getting small forward eligibility on him. So maybe in some of those Luka lineups, you can mix Sochan in. But I like him on FanDuel as well, even 1K more, but you get that power forward and point guard eligibility. Sochan now kind of taking the ball up the court for the Spurs and Houston. It's yet to be seen what they're going to be like on defense, but it's really not a matchup I'll be shying away from anytime soon.
Yeah, I was all over Sochan in the first game. DK, they raised his price a couple hundred, I think, but it's not to the point where it should be. We have the ability to play a point guard in the small forward and the power forward positions. And like I mentioned, we have great point guards playing tonight. And so I think we really want to slide Sochan into one of those forward spots if we're going that route. And then I want to mention Zach Collins real quick while we're on here. His ownership is actually way higher than I would expect, but his
Yeah.
price is still good. He's playing on the court next to Wemby. We saw Wemby get into some foul trouble, and I know we had some questions about Wemby in the chat last time. I didn't play him at all. I'm worried about the minutes, and we'll have to see how he transitioned the league. He kind of took over in the fourth quarter when he got back in after the foul trouble, but
Yeah.
it's not a spot I'm going to get to tonight. I think we have too many other good plays at the position.
Yeah, it's just 8,100 is kind of prohibitive as a price tag. I mean, he definitely has fantasy point per minute upside. So whenever he is going to see an uptick in minutes for whatever reason, yeah, he has upside. But I mean, I don't know. It's just tough to click him at that price right now.
And so we have a gobbler in the chat asking, Simmons is out, who gets the biggest boost? I think you're referring to Anthony Simons.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and just talk about the guard plays. Go ahead and pull this up here.
Yep.
So with the guard, we can see top ownership, the chalk, Chris Paul, Jalen Green, Karis LeVert. Darius Garland is not expected to play tonight. And so Karis LeVert, I wouldn't be surprised if his ownership even came up a little bit higher than this, assuming he's starting. He's a pretty good price. We saw Max Strus be the tournament winner on the last slate, just played out of his mind.
Yeah.
But Karis LeVert, for the most part, he's going to be the more reliable DFS player. We can still take some shots on Max Strus. He's coming in with no ownership again tonight. Let me just see here. Yeah, 1% on both sides, 5,600, 6,100 on FanDuel. I'm a little more interested in playing him on DraftKings than I am on FanDuel. I'm probably not going to get there more than a few percent anyway. But Donovan Mitchell is going to get steamed up. Again, he doesn't have Darius Garland out on the court with him. His price is still great. I'm still going to get there a little bit on both sides. But Karis LeVert seems like he's going to be the guard from Cleveland that most of the field's interested in tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I like Mobley a lot too. Still with Jared Allen out, he's going to see more usage. Not to get away from guards, but yeah, if we're talking about the Portland guards with Simons out, just getting back to that question, I mean, it looks like Scoot's getting a lot of the ownership. We're seeing 13% on DK, 27 on FanDuel. He looked terrible in his debut. Take that for what it's worth. I don't know how much that is worth. But yeah, I mean, if he's the more popular of that group, you could go to Shady on Sharp. Malcolm Brogdon, even if he comes off the bench, might have the highest floor of that group. Not as scoring dependent as those other guys, but yeah, I mean, that whole backcourt is going to be decent. And Orlando, not a terrible team, but again, not a terrible matchup if you're just talking fantasy. But the sneaky play, and you and I talked for just a minute before we got on live, I think Jeremy Grant, he's not a guard, so maybe that goes overlooked, but I think he could see the biggest boost in usage here with these other guys out. He demanded his way out of Denver because he wasn't getting the ball enough. And yeah, struggled in Detroit, but now on Portland, if Simons is going to be out for a few weeks, I could see him really becoming an alpha in this offense as Scoot Henderson kind of establishes himself at this level.
Hey, give me a guy projected for less than 5% ownership on both sides with probably increased usage, playing 33 minutes. I mean, I'm all about it. His price is good. And we have a question in the chat from Brian Jester, the Occupy Fantasy co-founder. Are there any rules for Portland players, specifically the guards in large field versus small field GPPs? So when I ran my lineups, I wasn't really getting lineups with three of these guys anyway. I would have said maybe we want to limit it to two of Shaden Sharp, Brogdon, and Scoot Henderson. I do think these three are probably going to share the court a decent amount. Malcolm Brogdon still probably comes off the bench. I think they like that stability in the second unit, but I'm not really worried about setting rules. Maybe you just want to do a max two of these guys with Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, Malcolm Brogdon. But yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable playing two of these guys. I mean, Scoot is the one that's going to get the hype. I mean, he was a top pick, and like I said, he had a terrible first game. He's still getting a little bit of ownership. But with Shaden Sharp, this dude, when he had the opportunity at the end of last season without Damian Lillard on the court, he was regularly putting up monster fantasy lines. And so at 1%, 5,300 on DraftKings, 5,700 on FanDuel, this is a spot I'm going to be well over the
field. It's climbing. I just refreshed. He's up to 9 and 7, but I still totally agree. Sharp is excellent here. Yeah.
Let's do a refresh and take a look here.
Yeah, and just to go back on the rules thing quickly, I would say if you're getting lineups that have three of these guys, then maybe set the limit. But there's so much good guard value tonight. I think you could not set the rule, and it's going to be rare that you're seeing these guys in three lineups, or three of these guys in a lineup. So unless you're getting that a ton, I think you're probably fine to just leave it. I totally agree that two is very viable.
Yeah, and it does look like after that refresh, after the model update, we are getting a ton of ownership to Shaden Sharp.
I caught it in the middle. Yeah, it's really Yeah.
So I'm still going to get there a bunch. I mean, at 5,300, if 25% of the field's going to get there, I don't think I care that much. He's just too
Mhm.
good of a play, projected for 33 minutes. And Scoot Henderson, too. I mean, he's just too cheap, particularly on FanDuel at
Oh yeah.
5,500. And then Brogdon, he's getting steamed up a little bit to where he's still a good pivot, but I think I would just go with Shaden Sharp, assuming they insert him into the starting lineup. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I like Sharp, probably the best of the group if he's going to be lesser owned than Scoot. But uh, yeah, I'll probably have two in my main lineups, probably Scoot and Sharp.
Patrick Coyne in the chat, and I see you, Patrick. Are you wanting to force Portland if the builder isn't getting there?
What's the total on that game? Orlando plays pretty slow, so I think like first thought is no, don't force it. Again, there is other value in other spots, especially if Garland's going to be out for Cleveland. Um,
I'm seeing
but
right around 219.5 on that game. Let me.
yeah, so relative to the slate, that's on the low end. The Celtics and Heat are 218, Bulls Raptors 217.
So, in regard, even though the total is a little bit lower, I do think that the fantasy usage is going to be a little bit more concentrated
Good
to
point.
those
Yeah.
guards on Portland. So I'm not as concerned about it as I might normally be.
Right.
And speaking of Orlando, there was a play on the other side that I just want to mention. Markel Fultz.
Yeah.
He's a guy I'm going to get to a lot. I think he has a high ceiling. He's a boomer bust type player. He's coming in with a little bit of ownership on both sides, but projected for 29 minutes. It sucks that he has to split time with Cole Anthony. Cole Anthony looked great in the first game too. But if we're deciding between one of these Portland guys, I think I'm getting to Markel Fultz every time. I think he has triple double upside, close to triple double upside, and
Yeah.
so that's another spot that I wouldn't mind getting to.
Yeah, and just to go off that, on FanDuel, Banchero is very much underpriced. I think he's down to 7,300 now. So if you want to get Paulo in there as a run back and you're heavy on Portland, I think that makes a lot of sense on FanDuel.
So, just some of the other top plays. I think that Trey Young stands out to me a lot. So, one thing I want to point out with the model is that unlike NFL, the OF index does not consider the price. This is just straight, I don't know, kind of like a ceiling, I guess, what we can expect from these guys. If you want to have it consider the price, sort by DK value and FD value. But when we have a guy like Trey Young sandwiched in here between all the 10K plus guys at 5% ownership, I think that's something that we want to pay attention to. And then even just below them, Steph Curry, I already mentioned Steph Curry, Donovan Mitchell, De'Aaron Fox, Kyrie Irving, like they all look fantastic and they're all coming in with low ownership. So if you're building a bunch of lineups tonight, I think that you just kind of want to mix it up at the point guard position for these premium guys. And we already saw that we have some value, Day'Ron Sharp at the power forward center position. So it's not going to be tough to fit these guys in.
Yeah, I totally agree. All those guys look great at their respective ownerships, and I think it's going to get even lower on a lot of those guys once Garland's ruled out. If he's ruled out, and more of that ownership goes to Donovan Mitchell. So yeah, you're going to get a lot of upside at very very low ownership if you're paying up for guard.
Just a couple more guards that stand out to me. Jaylen Brown on FanDuel at 6,900. And I will say that I'm pretty happy that FanDuel is very reactive to the price. They're bumping guys up insane after just one game, bumping guys down like Jaylen Brown to 6,900. And he's only coming in for 27% ownership. I don't think that's too bad. I think that's a spot that we can get to. And the other guy on here, Fred VanVleet, 47% ownership on FanDuel is absolutely insane. But the 7K price tag is probably 1K too cheap. There's
Right.
some uncertainty to see how he's going to fit in this Houston offense. But remember what he did on the Raptors last year. This guy consistently displayed a ceiling, and he doesn't have Nick Nurse anymore, but we still have him projected for 35 minutes. And so even at the 47% ownership, I think it's okay to get there. I'm probably going to be getting to more of these other guys up here mixed in with one of the Portland guards. But Fred VanVleet, yeah, chalk on FanDuel. Feel comfortable getting there. What do you think about Fred?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the price tag is just wrong. 7K flat on FanDuel. There's other spots you can get different, especially if you're using one of those other guard spots to pay up. You mentioned Jalen too. That's the other egregious price here. One other guy I do like is Jalen Williams on OKC. He has shooting guard eligibility at 5,800. We're showing him around 17% owned. I think that's a little bit lower owned than he should be for the price. Cleveland kind of known as this slow defensive team, but with Jared Allen out of the lineup, their identity kind of completely changes. We saw that Nets game go over easily the other night. And yeah, I just don't think it's the matchup that maybe some people excuse me, are projecting it to be, because Allen really does change the whole makeup of that defense, even though he's not the best individual defensive player or anything like that.
I like it. And then, just a couple other guards I want to mention. Jalen Brunson, I have a feeling he's going to get steamed up. I saw some of the touts on Twitter already
Mm.
kind of talking him up. So I wouldn't be surprised if his ownership came in a little higher than this. But I do think he's a great tournament play going up against Atlanta.
Yeah.
Just like I think DeJounte, I'm ready to lose more money on DeJounte Murray tonight at 1% ownership, 7,500 and 7,400. I think it's incorrect. I'm going to be decent amount over the field on DeJounte.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I did say early on, I'm going to try to jam in as much Luca as possible. It's going to be tough, but as more value opens up, if he's sub 5% on FanDuel, I can't help it. I'm just going to fit as much as I can and feel pretty damn good about it.
Yeah, I mean it's never a bad thing, and we even have a question in the chat from Chris Davis. If we had to choose between Jokic and Luka as a spend up, where would we go? And so we don't love answering 1v1s because it's like
Yeah.
we're going to be wrong almost half the time, right? But the thing that I would use to decide here, I mean, the OF index, Luka was obviously higher than Jokic, but it's not a terrible difference that it's like automatically Luka. The thing that I would consider is where's the value, and I think that we have value at every position today, actually. So maybe it's a
Yeah,
tougher decision than
it is tough.
but just where can you fit him in your lineup? As is Luka with one of the value power forwards or value centers? Does that feel better than Jokic with one of the value guards? And I think I actually kind of probably lean towards Jokic just from that point of view. But if you want to have a little bit more of a contrarian build, I think going to Luka is pretty strong.
Yeah, I think for me, I really like the matchup against my Nets and the high total, the high pace here. I'm leaning Luca, but again, it's a coin flip. You really can't go wrong. We're talking about the two best fantasy players in basketball.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's how does the rest of your lineup look? Do you trust Day'Ron Sharp more than some of the guard value, or the other way around? Because you're going to be eating chalk at other positions of value. So build it both ways. See which way you like it more. And if you could stomach Sharp over some of that guard value, then maybe you go with Luca.
And just two last guards I want to mention, particularly on DraftKings, Scotty Barnes at 6,900. I was all over this guy in the first game. He looked incredible. Now, keep in mind, he had a lot of stocks, which helped his monster fantasy line that night. But he didn't really do too much of the other stuff. Like he had the peripherals, but the scoring, I think we could see a little bit more. And at 4% ownership, 6,900, I'm going to be well over the field on Scotty. And Tyler Harrow at 3%. This dude took 24 shots. I don't think he made a shot in the second half. And so 6,600 and 6,500 at no ownership. I mean, Boston's a tough matchup, but Tyler Harrow, I think he's a great contrarian play to get to tonight.
Yep, I'm with you. I like Hero on both sides, and yeah, I think you nailed it with the guards there. Oh yeah, one thing on Scotty, he's over 8K on FanDuel. I think they have his price right, so he's egregious on DK. And I think you're right. The scoring is going to come up for him. Schroeder was hitting every shot, so he was scoring a lot of the points for the Raptors. I don't think that's something we can expect night to night.
Yeah, Schroeder actually surprised me a lot. His price, it's a little uncomfortable, but if you have him a little bit in your 20 max set or your 150 set, I think that's fine too.
Yeah, he's fine.
And so moving on to the forwards, does anything immediately stand out to you, Nick?
Yeah, let me just pull them up here. I know we talked about Simmons a little bit. I do really like him here, as gross as that sounds. But yeah, let me just pull up some of the. I have guards still selected, so I'm only looking at guards. Here we go. So yeah, we already talked about Jaylen Brown on FanDuel. 6,900 is a terrible price by FanDuel. It's a good price for us. Banchero 7,300. That's wrong. And then we're getting Sharp. We already talked about how much we like him. We see that ownership climbing on both sides. Again, really good play now that Anthony Simons is out of the lineup. But yeah, I mean, if you want to look on the top end, there's not a ton I love. Again, we got some really good guards at low ownership. There are guys like Jokic in there. I will say Zach LaVine, though, coming off a terrible game. Pretty bad performance shooting wise. I think he had negative points in the first quarter, and then he finally got it going. In this matchup with Toronto, this is not the defensive stalwart that Toronto's been in the past. I like LaVine a lot here to bounce back. We hear the Bulls had that players only meeting where they're screaming at each other, things like that. LaVine's the type of player I think reacts well to something like that. Not want to play the narrative too much. It's just 7K Zach LaVine on both sides. I mean, that's reason enough to like him here.
Yeah, I love playing players after they fail as chalk on
Oh
the
yeah.
following slate, especially when their price is so good, like Zach LaVine. And the thing with Zach LaVine specifically is him playing with the second unit. I think is really powerful for his fantasy performance. Just he's going to be checking out of the first quarter a little bit earlier, but he's going to have almost full freedom to do whatever he wants when he checks back in with the second unit. When DeMar and Vooch are off the court, probably Kobe White on the bench too. So love Zach LaVine at that price tag tonight. DeMar, I think he's a great price tag too. I mean, his ownership's coming in even higher than LaVine, which is kind of surprising. But I think I'd rather get to LaVine tonight. I'll still have a little bit of DeMar in my player pool, and then at the top end, Jason Tatum is showing up as pretty clearly the top forward play on both sides.
Yep.
I do think that the Miami matchup is a little bit tougher, but I mean, 10,500 for Jason Tatum. We saw him go off on day one. It didn't really end up mattering because so many other guys went off too. But at 2% ownership, this guy is like, at worst, a top 10 player in the NBA.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
he's top 5.
Yeah.
So Jason Tatum's a spot I want to get to. Paul George is getting forgotten at 8,500 and 9,100. And then Kristaps, people were uncertain about how it was going to look in Boston, but he looked fantastic in game 1. I'm still willing to get to him until he's 9K. And then Julius Randle, kind of like Jalen Brunson. I think he's a phenomenal GPP play tonight as well.
Yep. I'm with you on those. And I got one more I think you only missed because he's guard only on DK. Desmond Bane is 5% on both sides. I mean, this is a guy who was super chalky with John Moran out of the lineup. I know the price is up a little bit, but this is one of those pay up to be contrarian situations. If that game with Denver is going to be close, Bane should be a good bet to hit over 50 fantasy points. And yeah, at 5% ownership, I think that's a good way to get different if you need to. Again, forward on FanDuel, not on DK, but he is someone I don't want to just gloss over because obviously the upside's there with Morant out of the lineup.
And on that note about guys' prices coming up and their ownership tanking, like Desmond Bane was the chalk on the last slate,
He's
and
like
now
60%.
and now he's predicted for no ownership, and his price came up. Like, it's only a 1-game sample. If he puts up this 52 fantasy points again tonight at 8,600, we're not disappointed at all. Like, that's still a tournament winning play. And so at the low ownership, I'll probably be over on Bane tonight as well.
I'm with you.
Let me see here. Jaren Jackson, again, a guy that I thought the field was going to kind of avoid because he absolutely tanked lineups on day one, but he's still coming in for 20% ownership. I think his price is good on both sides. On FanDuel, blocks are worth 3. We know JJJ is a block guy. As long as he can stay out of foul trouble and stay on the court, he regularly got there in 30 minutes last season, and we haven't projected for 34 minutes. So, I mean, JJJ, great play, even with the little bit higher ownership.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel the exact same way about Evan Mobley.
Yep.
It's like they're the same play except 1K apart. With Allen out of the lineup, Mobley should do really well here. OKC's defense in the front court is poor, to say the least. So I know he didn't look great in that first game. But yeah, I think we get a much better performance here. And I already mentioned him once or twice, but I like Mikal Bridges at low ownership too. Again, I think when Cam Thomas isn't on the floor, Bridges is going to be the one doing the scoring. This is a nice game environment with Dallas. They're going to be playing a lot of back and forth transition basketball tonight. And that favors Bridges, and maybe he gets a few extra boards with Claxton out of the lineup.
Yeah, and on that note, Mikal Bridges is a phenomenal defensive player. They're going to need him to guard Luka, and so he's like try. Maybe he's going to have to put a little more energy into the defensive end, but it also means he's going to be on the court. So we have no worries about his minutes at all. We haven't projected for 36 minutes, which is pretty great, and we already know that he'll pull any shot he wants. So we love that there. Couple other spots. I'm a little bit interested in Isaiah Stewart. I kind of thought Jalen Duren was going to get steamed up a little bit more, but his ownership is actually in check, even though his price on DraftKings is really good. But Isaiah Stewart, pretty decent pivot, and we can play him at the power forward spot. And if you were around last year, you know that we targeted bigs against Charlotte. Maybe it's a little bit different with Mark Williams starting at center there now. But PJ Washington is still the starting power forward. And so far, bigs against Charlotte looks pretty good. So Isaiah Stewart, decent pivot option. We already mentioned Shaedon Sharpe, Scotty Barnes on DraftKings. Definitely play him in the small forward spot if you can. And then is there anyone else down here that maybe stands out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very different play than on DK. Sharp is only 5K on FanDuel and power forward eligible. He's only 10% owned over here. I think as a tournament play, he's fine. Again, we could play Simmons at power forward. It's funny because we talked about a lot of these guys, but with multi-position eligibility, I think you are going to want to play them more at forward than guard when we initially spoke about them. But let me just see if there's anyone else. Jabari Smith, I mean, didn't have a great game, drawing a ton of ownership though. I'm wondering if that's because Landale's out, but yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm a little bit surprised at his ownership, 26 on DK, 38 on FanDuel. I think he's a good play, but at that ownership, I'll probably get away from it. And then Zach Collins, I'm sure we're going to talk about him at center. He's power forward eligible, excuse me, on FanDuel as well.
Yeah, with Jabari Smith, this is actually a guy that I was coming into the season. I drafted him a ton in NBA best ball, a guy I was expecting to make a leap. And there's something about the coach is setting him up more to, I don't know, to complement his game more. They're giving him the open shots. He's a great shooter. And so if they're actively looking to get him the ball more, and he looked awesome in preseason.
Yeah.
Even at this ownership, I'm still going to get there some. I'm not going to be well over the field like I am with a lot of the other guys, though. And then THT kind of stands out just because his price hasn't come up. His ownership is down. The rotation in Utah, I have no idea what they're trying to do over there. It's complete disaster, but it's a spot I'm still going to get back to a little bit there.
Yeah, he's a good example of a guy who kind of busted his chalk, whose ownership completely plummeted. So makes sense to go back there. His price barely moved on either site.
And I just feel like we have to mention Zaire Williams. I mean, this guy was very frustrating. He only had, 9 points in the first game, but he played, I believe, 29 minutes. So let me just check this out right here. Yeah, I mean, 29 minutes for a guy at 4K starting for this disaster of a Memphis team. Sorry, Memphis fans, but it's a guy I'm willing to get back to him. I mean, the model says that he's one of the top values. He's projected for 2% ownership, so it's not a guy that we have to go crazy on. Just have him in your player pool, and if he has a good game, then you're going to be over the field no matter what if he's there. So we should be good.
Yeah, guys similarly priced too. Not the most exciting to play. Kevin Love on Miami,
Mm-hmm.
4,300, drawing a little bit of ownership. The minutes are kind of tough to gauge over there, but he should be on the floor a lot tonight against a pretty big team in Boston, or a team he matches up fairly well against compared to some of the other guys they have there. So I don't mind Love. Never a guy I'm excited to play, but at the price, I do think he makes some sense. And maybe a higher floor than Williams, priced similarly. Not quite the same ceiling, but yeah, that's a tricky spot for sure for value.
Yeah, I don't mind getting there either. Kind of similar to Isaiah Stewart. I want to play these guys in the power forward spot. I think there's way too many good center plays tonight to
Yeah.
take up our center spot with a guy like Kevin Love, even a guy like Isaiah Stewart. And Lucas in the chat, any thoughts on Pistons bigs? Yeah, I already mentioned that Isaiah Stewart's a pretty good play, and it's a good transition into the centers. My favorite center play tonight is going to be Jalen Duren. Where is Jalen Duren? You find Jalen Duren. Give me 1 second, fellas. I thought he was actually near the top of a DK value. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Of course, I missed him. He's number 2 on DK value right after the super mega chop incorrect price Dayron Sharp. But Jalen Duren, 17% ownership on DraftKings, I think is very reasonable considering he's 5,600. He had a monster game in game 1. We already saw him display that ceiling last season. And James Wiseman played 0 minutes in the first game. I think Marvin Bagley, I don't even think he played 20 off the bench. So it's pretty clear that the Pistons are comfortable going to Jalen Duren. We haven't predicted for 32 minutes. And at 5,600, I think this is just very clearly the best center play on the whole slate, if not Dayron Sharp. The 7,900 on FanDuel, it's a little bit more than I want to get to, but there's something about paying too much for a guy. And at 1% ownership, I mean, it's hard to imagine what he could do to be in the winning lineup at 7,900 on FanDuel. But DraftKings, it's so incorrect. And then Isaiah Stewart, we see the third value on DraftKings after these guys. So I like getting to both of these guys a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you on both. I mean, I'm certainly not going to be playing Duren over on FanDuel, but I do think it's telling that that's his price over there. And on DK, you're getting a ridiculous discount. So I agree that Duren's probably the best center play on DK after Sharp in terms of point per dollar. Kevon Looney, didn't have a great game in game 1 with, Draymond out, but I do think he has more upside than he's showing. I don't mind him as a center play. The chalk on FanDuel does appear to be Zach Collins at 6K flat. I think he's totally reasonable. 5,700 over on BK. There are so many. I could just keep going. I mean, Mark Williams looks really good here. You already mentioned Duren. The price is up on Tillman, but he showed a massive ceiling. In lineups, you're not playing Jackson. Maybe go back to Tillman at reasonable to low ownership. We talked about Sengun really early on. He's another guy drawing a ton of ownership in the mid-range. I think he's fine. And similar to guard, if you want to sort by OF index, you wanted to see what the best plays are. The top 3, Jokic, Sabonis, Porzingis, it's kind of funny putting Porzingis in this category, but yeah, they're all sub 10% on both sites. So if you can find a way to pay up at center, it is a way to get different on this slate. And I think all three of those guys have some upside at low ownership. It's just whenever you get this much value in the mid range, it's really tough to get away from. So I'm with you on Durant. Really like Zach Collins. Collins will probably be my highest on center on FanDuel as chalk, but I'm going to get pretty different at other positions in those lineups.
So I'll mention again, OF Index is not price sensitive. This does not consider salary at all. And we have Jalen Duren at 5,600 sandwiched in between these guys that are 9,500, 7,300, 7,200. So, the model thinks Duren is just a phenomenal play today. And Lucas in the chat asking, would we ever play two centers, for example, on DK, Sharp, and Duren, or is that not optimal? I think it's very optimal.
Yeah, it's price dependent.
Yeah, I'm going to have, just looking at the builds that I have right now in my utility spot, it's all centers and point guards. And so I think those are the positions we want to target the most in utility. Point guards, they have the ball in their hands, and then centers, just opportunity for stocks, rebounds, easy buckets. And so, I think it's very optimal to play two centers, especially tonight on DraftKings, especially with the value options that we have in that 6K range. It's pretty good.
Yeah, Detroit's a special situation too, in that they do share the floor a little bit. I'd have to check the rotations, but it's not like it's a direct split where the backup just plays the starter minutes and vice versa. There are moments where Stewart's in there at power forward, and yeah, I love both. They're just mispriced. Like when two guys are egregiously priced, even if they're on the same team, they're going to pop towards the top of the value. You could play them together. If they were priced where they should be, maybe this would be a tougher conversation. But yeah, on DK, they're pretty egregiously priced, so very easy to fit in the same lineup and feel good about.
And we have put me in the game, Coach Chris, fading Sharp because Dallas might go small and play him off the court. It's certainly a risk. My thing with Day'Ron Sharp is his price is probably 2K too cheap on DraftKings, and we haven't projected for 24 and a half minutes. Let's say he only gets 20 minutes. He could get there in 20 minutes, and then it's not just what he does, but it's what he allows you to do with the rest of your lineup. It opens up so much. Exactly. We can easily get to Luka or Jokic in the utility spot or the point guard spot, whatever. And so, Day'Ron Sharp in the builds that I have, I still have to do some refinement, but he's by far my highest owned player right now on DraftKings at he's in almost all of my lineups. So I think he's a spot that we just want to get to today. DK value, especially even just at center, like this is just insane. And his OF index isn't too bad either.
No, I'm with you. And again, it's not that we love the player Day'Ron Sharp. It's just we love what he affords us at the other positions. For a big slate, there's some value, but there's not a ton of great value spots at the very, very cheap end. So if there was, maybe you could get away from a bit more and feel comfortable about it. But you just eat that chalk and pay up, get different at other positions. And even if he doesn't have a good game, if you're with a big chunk of the field, it's probably not going to kill your whole night either.
Yep. And so we're going to get out of here in just a few minutes. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and put together a little dummy build over on DraftKings. I think that it's pretty easy to just go ahead and start with Day'Ron Sharp in at the center spot.
Yep.
And we have a couple questions, thoughts on Keegan Murray. So Keegan Murray, this guy's good, and Sacramento likes him. The fact that he's taking as many shots as he is, let me see how many minutes he played in the first game. 30 minutes. It was a little bit of a blowout, so maybe he had the potential for a few more. But, he took 13 shots in the preseason. We saw him get up to 17. And at his price, 5,200, what's his ownership coming in at?
Low.
Yeah, I'm guessing no one's really getting there. People are... Yeah, it's a spot I'm more than willing to get to. He's going to be on the court regardless. And they're playing Golden State. Shouldn't really be a blowout. So Keegan Murray, very good contrarian play tonight. And... OG Anunoby. Yeah, OG's kind of getting forgotten too. People want to get on Scotty Barnes. Pascal Siakam is still Pascal Siakam. And we mentioned Dennis Schroeder also had a good game one, but OG Anunoby at 1% ownership on DK 5,900. His FanDuel price is a little bit higher than I want to pay, 7,600 coming in with zero ownership. But 5,900 on DraftKings, I think it's reasonable. He's a pretty contrarian play, so don't go crazy on him. But if you want to get there over, Scotty Barnes, Scotty Barnes at 4%, I just think is too good of a play.
Yeah, and that's an amazing play. Yeah, I would go OG over Barnes, but yeah, OG's definitely in play at that price.
Let's just go ahead and plug in Scotty Barnes at the small forward position.
I like it.
And I kind of want to play Jalen Duren in our utility spot.
I'm fine with it. Yeah, go for it. He's so cheap.
it's got to be such a good spot. And like I mentioned, we don't know for sure that we're targeting centers against Charlotte, but it's been a thing for a few seasons now. And so maybe it's different with Mark Williams, like I said. But for now, at this price tag, regardless of the matchup, it's just too cheap for Jalen Duren.
Yep.
And you want to go ahead and should we get Luka in here?
Yeah, let's get Luca in. One other guy I was going to recommend was So Chan. Regardless of where you want to put him, I think we could do small forward or forward at 5K flat. I like him a lot as well.
Yeah, let's get Sochan in here. And then we have another question at that. Thoughts on Jalen Johnson? So this guy is shooting out of his freaking mind.
Yeah.
Can he keep it up? I don't know. Maybe he can, maybe he won't. But it's hard. So this is a large slate, and it's hard for me to want to get to guys coming off the bench, even though we know he's probably going to play 20 plus minutes. But because he's a good rebounder, which is it helps create a little bit of a safer fantasy floor.
Yeah.
But if he's going to be a little bit scoring dependent, I mean, where's Jalen Johnson? 4,700. He played 29 minutes, which is phenomenal. He shot 9 for 13. It's not sustainable, but I mean, he got the stocks. He got 7 rebounds. He put up 40 DraftKings points almost. So, I mean, he's a fine play. Probably not someone I'm going to get to tonight, but if you think that's the spot, then I don't hate it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel kind of similar to him about Cam Thomas, if not a little bit worse. It's like they're going to come off the bench, but they are generally scoring dependent. And the thing with Johnson is he was facing Charlotte, one of the worst defenses in the NBA. Tonight they're taking on the Knicks. Definitely a tougher spot, I think.
Yeah, Charlotte's going to be a team that we're targeting all season. So,
exactly. Yeah.
What are we thinking at the shooting guard spot? So even with this build, we have our high pay up Luka, and then we have Scotty Barnes in the mid range. We got 3 pretty cheap plays. We have 6K almost remaining.
I was going to say Shady on chart. If we want to eat one more piece of chalk, Shady on's 5,300 at shooting guard. I think that's solid.
Let's go ahead and get Shaden in here. And so now we have over 6K for each position. And I plugged in Sochan at the forward position here. I figure that we want to get another guard in that guard spot down there. Mm-hmm. And so we can do a couple things. We can pay up for one of these guys that were showing up high in the model. Trae Young, Steph Curry, De'Aaron Fox at 8,700 is a bargain. Or we could go down to someone like, Levine a little bit cheaper. Tyler Harrow is, I think, one of my favorite contrarian plays of the night.
I like Levine if you want to go there.
Yeah, let's keep it simple with Levine. And then that leaves us 5,400 at the power forward spot. And it's too easy.
Smith, bingo.
Yeah, Jabari Smith. And so this is a pretty good lineup. So
it's a damn good lineup.
Probably going to have to try to make sure to get this in my set. But for DraftKings, I think this is pretty solid. This is a pretty solid core. If you're building a bunch of lineups, these are guys that you probably want to have more than the field in your exposures.
Agreed.
And I just plugged in this is the OF builder. If you've never seen it before, this is the single build mode where you can just click in guys as you want. FanDuel is being pretty annoying today. I can't even log in on my desktop. So put in a couple guys on FanDuel. I plugged in Trae Young at 2%. Again, he's showing up high in the model. He's cheap. Fred VanVleet, the super chalk, 50% owned. Jaylen Brown, too cheap. Tyler Harrow, one of my favorite plays. And then Day'Ron Sharpe, even at 5K, still willing to get there. And then Alperen Sengun, for the price on FanDuel, I think is probably one of the better center plays. He's projected for 29% ownership, so that's reflected in there. Were there any other guys that stood out particularly on FanDuel?
Yeah, I mean, you have small forward open. I think we could go Shaden Sharp again over here, only 5,700. And then I'm trying to see what else you have left for salary.
So if you got 6K at each spot, it's plenty.
Yeah, Zach Collins has power forward eligibility on FanDuel, so you could play Collins with Sengun in the same game. That's pretty fun. I like that.
Let's get that in here.
I think that's pretty strong. And
leaves us 6K for the small forward spot.
Let's see here. We already got Sharp. I mean, Jalen Williams I mentioned. I think he's a good play.
I like Jalen Williams. Let me
leaves 200 on the table. Or Karis LeVert, if you want to maybe play that safe.
We can get a Karis LeVert, Shaden Sharp. We can get in there too.
Yeah.
We already have Shaden Sharp.
Guys, Williams, LeVert, Sharp. We already have Sharp. Yeah, those 3 are all really solid in that range.
Go ahead and plug in Jalen Williams since we have the salary for it. So it leaves 200 left over. You can't see the ownerships over here. I apologize about that. But Trae Young at 2%, Tyler Harrow at 6%, Shaden Sharp. It hasn't updated yet since the model update. But, I mean, having 2 spots under 10% is already enough to get different on FanDuel. And these are all plays that we like a lot tonight, and so we can get there pretty comfortably.
Absolutely.
So is Ben Simmons a good play on DK? Lucas asks. Yeah, I think Ben Simmons is a pretty good play. The main thing is he only played 23 minutes, and historically he's been better than a fantasy point per minute. So if he gets closer to that 30 minutes, especially if some of those minutes are at the center spot, Ben Simmons is going to look great tonight.
Agreed.
Max Strus had to be a lucky night. I mean, Max Strus is a good player. I don't know if he's 50 fantasy points a night good, but yeah, he definitely had a phenomenal game. If the field gets on, let me just refresh, see where Karis LeVert's ownership's at. If the field gets heavy on Karis LeVert, then yeah, I mean, Max Strus should have a little bit more opportunity still, and he's a great pivot. He's steamed up to 7%. He was only 1% a few minutes ago. And Karis LeVert at 42% on DraftKings. So if you guys played DFS last season, you know how frustrating Karis LeVert chalk night can go. And he's a good play at 4,900, regardless if he's starting or not. We haven't projected for 34 minutes. He's probably going to start. But I don't know. We have enough low on plays. I'm not really worried about getting to the chalk too much tonight. So I think it's fine.
I agree.
So, Nick, any last words before we get out of here?
Yeah, no, nothing really. Just keep an eye on news. I know we're still waiting to confirm that Garland's out. I think that's the one big piece. I think everything else is pretty much determined. I do know Cam Johnson on the Nets was questionable all day. I don't know if we got an update on that. If he's out, that's just more minutes for everyone else. So guys like Bridges, Simmons, even Thomas, if you want to go there, they're all going to see a little bit of a boost if Johnson's out as well because he does take up some usage there. But really just keep an eye on the news. I think it's Eric in the Discord the next 30 minutes, so definitely hop in there. I'm sure he's going to process any lineups or news that come in as it breaks. But yeah, just let's make some money tonight.
Let's do it. And Cam Johnson was ruled out 10 minutes ago, so it doesn't change anything. We already assumed he was out anyway. And Eric should be getting started in Discord right about now. So any last minute questions, go ahead, throw them in there. If you're not in the Discord, there's instructions in the description below. So throw us a like, subscribe to the channel. We're going to be live every single day at the same time, about 5:45 p.m. Eastern. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks.
Take care.
All right.